Okay.
Yes.
So greetings, Sir Tomlin. I'm promoting you to Sir Tomlin because your knowledge,
Well, that is quite flattering, and I'm humbled by that.
yeah, absolutely. I've been intrigued by, the amount of knowledge you've imparted to myself and hopefully to many others. So, so it's fabulous to be here again, and we're looking now to go into episode 3B, where we're going to look at parts of the 90s still and going forward.
That's right.
Over to you, sir.
Yes, as we go into the 90s, many of the people who started during the 80s in terms of the LA and Babyface, and also Jimmy Jam and Terry List, there were those two production teams and songwriters and producers and eventually label owners in their respect. LaFace Records, owned by those two guys, and Perspective Record was owned by Jimmy Jam and Terry Lewis, right? So two different, and they're located in two different distinct cities. Minneapolis, where Prince is originally from, and Atlanta, Georgia, where the one of the Olympic Games occurred. And of course, with Atlanta, Georgia, it has a very big airport hub where Delta operates from, Delta Airlines. That's Delta Airlines' main hub, actually, apparently. So it's a transition point that connects with JFK and everybody going West Coast and different flight destination, both long haul and short haul. Yes. Right. So and of course it's the once the home, if I'm understanding, of the legendary Slade civil rights leader, Martin Luther King, yes, the museum and so forth. So it's a very important cultural center.
Yes, I can see
Black
that.
people, and
quite a hub, isn't it?
Yes, a major hub, and it's a major hub in terms of Mr. Perry, Tyler Perry, who had his film studio there, massive film facilities. Yeah. So it is a very important culturally and different levels.
Okay. Yeah.
Right. So as these two gentlemen emerged, you have in the background a lady by the name of Vicky McLatay, the founder of Gospel Music Eccentric, the successful Black label that dominated the gospel sector for 10 years and grossed over 100 million in its first 10 years. 100 million, bruv.
Wow. So you say that's ownership by that particular lady?
Yes, under ownership, yes. Before she sold it to Zomba, which terms of Verdi. Well, actually, when you think about Zomba was actually owned at the time by South African white brothers, who were based in, you remember, the same Zomba, Jav Records is where Billy Ocean, R. Kelly, NSYNC, Britney Spears, and so forth came out of that label.
When you think of history, I mean, the names that you just called there. Oh,
but
man.
they're all major creative power brokers and big sellers, globally.
Yes.
Oh yes, they're massive chart hit making runs.
Absolutely, remember well.
And then you have under all, as I mentioned, those people. You have Black brothers working with them in the songwriting and production and sound engineer and musicians. Everything's
okay.
Right.
Right.
So, and the interesting thing about Zomba Records, my friend late Linton Bettle, remember when Billy Ocean was doing an audition for the label, and he encouraged the owners to sign the brother, and the rest is history. That was in Willesden, bro.
In Willesden?
Yes, that's where they were based at one time. Oy.
Wow.
Now, this is the thing that we need to understand. When it comes to cultural movements and diversity, territory becomes non-existence.
Okay.
You know, I mean, if you are massive, if you're outstanding hit-making entity,
yes.
What's territory? I mean, Stardust is from Norway, a pop production team who's worked with Beyonce, Whitney Houston, everybody in between.
Wow.
Wow.
It's almost like a seamless border, isn't it?
Thank you. Seamless borders. When these guys going to hit, money dictates. It's no longer, well, let's make sure we get him there because I want the, you know, when Clive Davis says, I want the hit, I'm begging for the hit. He's not looking at, where is he? Do I care? What? So that's when you look at, when you're looking at industry from a global perspective.
Yes.
Not a territorial one. And at point, we must mention our dear friend Fricks McIntyre, who of course was from the UT and became a co-founder, a member of Simply Red.
As in the New Testament Church of God, UT.
Yes, from the New Testament, and he went and he was, his father was Jeremiah McIntyre, the legendary Jeremiah McIntyre, a multi-instrumentalist and one of our legendary black bishops, you see.
Yes.
That's a serious brother, that. Yeah.
Linking into Simple Red.
Simply Red, because before he got involved in Simple Red, he was a Shiloh band. There's several brothers who worked with him and knew him from the early days. I knew him from the way back when he used to, I call him a keyboard wizard, you see. You know, amazing instrumentalist. Could play the guitar, could do several things. His sister was brilliant as a composer, and they were writers too. And they were the backbones of the Majestic Singers.
Oh, really?
Yes.
Another big name there.
Yeah, bro. So when it comes to the music aspect of it, you have several brothers that you need to interview, and then you're going to get a nice color.
I'm more than happy. I'm more than happy to do that.
I'm going to introduce you to all of them. I don't care. We pull them as a rope. And then on top of that, with notice I'm sort of building you up now for the 890s. Now, when you talk about that, at the same time, Majestic Singers, Highgate Singers, which is the brainchild of Pamela McIntyre and Fricks McIntyre, because they're the ones who do the musicalization and composing and arrangement. Okay. It was more funky, in other words. It probably had a Walter Hawkins impact, you know, it's more, and a New York community choir from New York during the 70s, right. You know, things like that. Which, would you believe it? This is interesting, that there were several gospel tracks that became disco number ones.
Really?
Yes,
really?
Yes. Mighty High by the Mighty Clouds of Joy became disco. They were disco hits, bro.
You know, it's the first time I'm hearing of that, you know.
Yes, even the Sound of Blackness during the 90s, when we get to, they had disco number ones.
Wow. I mean, I've heard of it the other way around, where, you know, obviously you get songs and people decide to sing them in the church in terms of, you know, biblical words and things. But I've never heard it the other way around, where
listen, when a track really hits the consciousness of people, do they care about what?
No, because people are people, you know.
Oh, thank you very much. We tend to forget that. We like to put people into categories. Yeah. And stop it. Let the people decide for themselves. Not you.
Yes.
Trying to segment the market and fit in all statistics. No. Anyhow, so with the Majestic Singers, it was more a sort of a more polished sound, you know, like the Andrew Crouch sort of sound, but yet it was just as technical as well. And you had the arranger behind it is Steve Thompson, who is in itself from Church of God, but from the Answorth side of the equation, while the other church in the city of Birmingham is Highgate. So you have two separate choirs from UT having the signature sounds within the city. Ah.
Oh.
Wow. Yes.
And these are all in the 90s, would you say?
They were in the 80s, and then they impact the 90s.
Right.
We're talking about how each decade impacts.
Yes.
Because out of these two things happen here. Out of the Majestic singers, Bishop Reuben King became a label owner in the late 90s.
Wow.
With Kingship Records. This is a Black-owned gospel that exists today.
I think yes, you know, when we last spoke, the label owner. Now that was very good.
Yes, and so out of him being the guitarist, rhythm guitarist for Majestic, and progressed towards a label owner and a session man.
Fantastic. Love that. Because I think, you know, going forward, you know, I'm not saying people are not doing it at the moment, but there should be a concentration there of ownership, you know.
Well, okay, this is interesting. During the 90s, you have Tony Bean, who has his own production as well, based in Birmingham. He has his own label production, and he was involved in a lot of major projects. So these are all people from the church who actually emerge and impact the secular market. Now you have Patrick White, who is from New Testament, who impact, and then don't forget you have Beresford Crawford, who is from Church of God of Prophecy, and he's doing his production right. So there's several brothers behind the scene day after interview who are part of this, a part of the 70s and so on. And some of them are the godfathers of Brit Funk and so forth, and presently impacting today with their stuff behind the scenes. And yeah.
That's good.
And Jackie Brown, for instance, who became a solo artist as well as did a duet with David Grant, is originally from the group that my friend Elliot Brown was part of. And of course, he worked closely with Fritz McIntyre, who actually worked with Simply Red. So if you listen to Simply Red, let's go. We're still keeping it on gospel now. Don't lose it yet. We're talking about the gospel, isn't it? Yeah. Simply Red. If you want to hear Fritz McIntyre's impact, just listen to his interpretation. If you don't know me by now, you remember their hit?
Yes.
And you hear the keyboard riffs and changes. Right. That's him.
Okay.
Right? You understand the brother now. The brother is a keyboard wizard, a technocrat. He understands groove. He operates in a different frame of reference.
Okay.
The first 5 albums of Simply Red, he was responsible for the whole musical structure and arrangements.
Really?
He was requested about 2 times or 3 times to join Simply Red because of how he eventually accept. When he was involved with Simply Red, on average, Simply Red would do about maximum 3 million copies per time, almost, with each album in Europe alone. 3 million copies across Europe per time with each album, with several million in the UK market. They became the 15th best-selling UK gospel group of all time, bruv. Wow. At the height before Fritz McIntyre departed from the group.
Right.
You get it?
Fantastic.
That is musical experience, what he learned from his father, because his father was a instrumentalists. Reverend Jeremiah McIntyre could write. He played several instruments. His mother was a musician.
Wow.
So he came from it, and his sister was, and they were songwriters and everything.
Wow.
What?
Wow.
So that's just giving a bit of how these brothers go from the 80s and impact the 90s with their stuff.
Yes.
And of course, Steve Thompson was impacting within the white Christian gospel market with Hendrix and everybody as a keyboard. He's a wizard himself as a composer and what have you. And that's my godfather's son. So we're very close, you know.
Yeah. Wow. Wow.
Right. So when we hit the 90s now, we have other people. We talk about two individuals from up north, and we put Reuben King, which eventually would, Reuben King's label now, his son in particular, most recently had 1 million hits, views for a video that he did. And there are talks that they're having with major labels.
Wow, 1 million hits.
And that comes out of Kingship Records, a black-owned label that's based in Birmingham. They have their own studio, by the way.
Really?
look. It's right in your street.
Yeah.
There's a lot of, I'm telling you, there's a lot of things happening right underneath your nose, bro.
Yes, yes. I have to learn more about these things.
Yes, and of course, remember the legendary black-owned label, which is Grover Road Studio, black-owned, is based in Handsworth.
Wow. Wow. And I mean, going back in time there.
Yes.
You know, because I was looking at something this morning, and I touched upon Steel Pulse, which is from Handsworth. You know,
yes,
and you know others and others. So yeah,
yes.
Interesting.
The city in particular, the Birmingham city has a sound. It has a culture and a movement.
Right. Yes.
It has a signature.
Yes. Which is great.
Does that make sense?
Yes. Yes. Absolutely. Absolutely. Yes.
And then you have Manchester now is a different kettle of fish, where Luke Smith and all of them come. That's the whole.
Right.
As these brothers migrate and impact as they do studio work and impact the George Michaels of the world and so forth.
Wow.
Yes.
Wow. This musical world is just so, it's fantastic. It's so diverse.
Yes, because I mean, before the church sort of integrated and started to work together in America, blacks and white were working with each other already. They were in the studio doing string arrangements and everybody's working. After a while, the music dictated, not the language, the music dictated. You know, you have Gene Page working with Phil Spector on arrangements, you know, with Righteous Brothers. For the strings, Black Brother. Look, music has no color. When a white engineer and arranger is interested in a masterpiece, he's begging for the best. He's not looking for what is your color, bro? Nope. Can you do it?
Yes.
That's Frank Sinatra used to say that to his black brother. Can you do it, brother? Please. I haven't got time. Whether you look where you're from, what part of the world you're from.
Yeah.
Do you know your craft?
Yes. Yes.
I mean, Sinatra was good friends with Quincy. I mean, they were so tight with each other. It was like they were brothers. They were brothers. Where Quincy is, Sinatra is. So that's what happened with the late Otis Redding and Steve Cropper. We're talking about people. So it altered its impact what happens today.
Yes.
And of course, we're talking about the after effect of Thriller, post-Thriller. This is post-Thriller experience and post Purple Rain experience.
Oh,
this
gosh.
is what happened in the following decade.
do you just a question here, my mind sort of just went back to Africa.
Yes.
In terms of the gospel side of things. And as you say, the music transcends, there's no real border, but there's also influences. Because you talk about Birmingham, you talk about its own signature, and Manchester its own signature. Has Africa got an actual signature of its own when it comes to the gospel side of things?
Yes, it would. If you listen to the Nigerian gospel signature sound,
right,
from Ghana, from the Gulf Coast, the East Coast and so on, there are sounds. You hear the rhythms and you hear the blues and so forth. Yes, it's a continual, and that is a different field of study, of course.
Absolutely.
But it's the same thing. Same thing does apply. Some of it they don't use horns. Some like to use horns of different levels of percussion instruments and so forth. That dictates the sound. Yes. Yeah, of course there is.
And then of course I go into even the Caribbean will have some sort of differences as well. Like if you think of Trinidad being so much into their
soca,
and things, there must be an element of some of that coming into the gospel world somehow.
Of course. As different, should I say, musicians from different cultural background, like Pablo, who is of Cuban and Brazilian influence. Pablo, a percussionist who used to work at Quincy Jones, he comes in with the Latin and so on. You have the different master musicians, and Adrian Labelle, who is I think is Brazilian, and so on. These are he's master at the bass. You listen to his mastery and Don Corneli, those albums out of now that's just during the 90s there. The gospel in the 90s. We're talking about that in terms of Don Corneli albums that on Integrity. Yes. A few gold albums there that you can hear the bass lines of Labelle, Abraham Labelle. Right. Yes? You understand? Latin.
Nice.
Look, bro. We could go on all. And remember, we're into this session about what 20 minutes, and we haven't hit some of the serious boys yet. We're touching some already.
All right, go. Let's go, man. Let's go.
But the thing about it is a whole part of this, what's happening this side of the pond and what's happening in the other side of the pond. It all hearing each other's sound.
Yes.
Because remember, sound has no barrier.
Absolutely. Yeah. You like the music, or you don't like the music, and you just go with the flow,
That's right. It's very simple.
Yes.
Right. Yeah. So the 90s, of course, as we talk about Frix McIntyre, and these key people, all part of the creative pillar of the sound that developing during the 90s. What happened in the 80s, going to the 90s? Yes. So when we think about the emergence of the Kirk Franklin, starting humble beginnings during the early 90s, 93. The reason why I sing that album, building up, selling large portions of albums as it goes from territory to territory, as he tours, it starts to build up a groundswell. Let's say it starts with it peaks at about 50,000. Okay. Then suddenly, as he goes on tour, it doubles that to 100,000. And brothers, okay, still small. Yeah, that's peak. And then it goes from 100,000 to 150 to 200,000. Weird. Hold on. And then Spring is saying, this could be a gold certified. Remember, they didn't think it could do that because Kirk Franklin and Gospel Eccentric was thinking it probably would peak about 60,000. But you think about a live album live album that went to platinum. That's unheard of. The first platinum album that did that was Amazing Grace by Aretha Franklin in 1972. Really? Yeah. Wow. And so you're talking about 20 years difference. And all of a sudden, a black label did that. Right. Now, listen to this. Kirk Franklin did it again.
Really?
Yeah, so he's broken the record because you can't, you know, doing a platinum live album once, and then you do it again. And if you look at the both albums, they probably did about 4 million copies between the both of them. They were huge. They were both on the charts the same time. I'm not going to go in details, but they were both on the charts. So by the time the mid-90s come, the music industry is going through a revolution because every other sector, in terms of jazz, R&B and so on, they had stagnant growth, and the pop market was having stagnant growth.
Okay.
And then all of a sudden, the gospel sector is having serious growth. They're moving, I mean, by the end of 1996, the gospel industry had moved 50 million units in the US alone. 50 million. That means Stephen Chapman, W.H. Smith, Kurt Franklin, C.C. Winan, Donald McClurgan, Fred Hammond, all of them were they were just popping every corner, bum, from the West Coast to the East Coast. Boom, 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 boom. Right? Wow. And then the major labels said, but wait, we're missing something. We need to start buying and start throwing money. So when you look at a gospel project, they were spending the same amount of money for studio production compared to the secular partners.
Oh, really?
Oh, yes. They were calling the best string rangers in. So the quality of the music was going up and the sound.
Yes.
Oh, yes. I mean, Kirk Franklin was so hot that some of his albums sold 3 million copies, bro.
Amazing.
I mean, at one time during the 90s, in particular, there were 17 gospel artists, including blacks, as well as pop, etc. 17 of them that did 2 million copies and above with their project. 2 million copies and above in continental United States. That means they were moving the same amount of units as the Tony Braxton and everybody.
That is big.
That's crazy.
Yes.
That's, you know, what?
So would you say that there was a point when it just went a long way in a short space of time?
Yeah, it just exploded because prior to 95, the gospel music industry was just plodding along at about between 100 to 200 million. Notice the word. Then all of a sudden, they went from that to over 5 million, 500 million. That was a 41% growth. It just shifted.
Wow.
And then there was 2 occasions prior to the end of the 90s and going into the 2000s where the gospel music almost grossed nearly on 3 occasions $1 billion in gross earning.
That is a lot.
That is silly money, bro. That is.
Yeah. And you're talking gospel because at one time.
We're talking gospel. I'm not talking.
Yeah.
We're talking secular. We're talking gospel, bro. You know, you had Freddie Hammond doing Touch of an Angel production, the soundtrack, you know, Prince of Egypt. Those tracks were just moving. I mean, these brothers, you know, Fred Hammond was in production. He had his production company, and they were knocking numbers, bro. The numbers were knocking. It was almost to the point where people couldn't believe what they were seeing. What? I mean, you're having gospel artists selling out arenas.
Amazing.
We're not talking about, you know, arena, you know, 20,000. We're talking about 100,000. You know,
Yeah, that's an explosion there, right?
Oh yeah, that was. I lived there. That was nuts, upper nuts. And then you have the corporate entities, Southwest and McDonald, all of them is running and doing concert tours, underwriting concert tours in the X amount of million. You know, I mean, you have 3 gospel artists grossing 100 million. Concert ticket. Are you hearing what I'm saying, bro?
Nice.
And remember, I'm just doing a summary. If we go into details, we'd both have a headache, but we start looking at the numbers and who is advertising what and who is doing.
Yeah. Yes.
Madison Avenue, the advertising people, they're rolling up their hands because this is like, whoa.
Wow.
And during that time, you had gospel soundtracks, like Temptation song, you know, hitting the box office with 30 million, 40 million, 50 million gross earning. Za.
Wow.
And remember, on top of that, while that is happening, the secular market to do with black soundtracks, there was about 30 black soundtracks before the 90s peaked that was doing gold and above. I mentioned some in our last yesterday. Look, when you look at the 90s was a totally different ball game for blacks. You know, the Teddy Rileys. The Teddy Rileys produced the Winans album, Time for Change, on the Quincy label. That was gold. That was a jack swing, you know, the 2 brothers meet with the hip-hop producer, and that was took it to another zing zong. So everything was happening at once. And remember Tupac with his revolution, Dr. Drake on the West Coast, Snoop Doggy Dogg, and everybody's just kicking, and gospel is just, you know, I mean, people were just, whoa. And our sisters, our black professional sisters, were some of the highest income earners in the demographics. You know, he had several black sisters were commanding about 6-figure income, easy, as execs, as business owners. And then remember, don't forget, you had the Woman Thou Art Loose movement called T.G. Jakes. And when they hit a city, the rental car business go to the roof, bro. And hotel and the hairdressing. And look.
There's major spin-offs with all these, aren't there?
And you know, and then you had Clinton administration, you know, so the whole all kinds of things happening at the same time.
So then, how much of that wave has been brought forward from the 90s right up to 20, say, you know?
Oh, right. Okay, then. Let's just look at some of the, right. Okay. So this is interesting. By the time Vicky sold Eccentric Record, it did $100 million. Now, this is another interesting thing about Vicky. Little Mac's catalog, which she owns, is comprised of more than 800 songs written by some of gospel music premier artists and songwriters, including Kurt Franklin, Brian Gage, Donnie Clark Curl, Hezekiah Walker, Kurt Carr, Trinity.7. Okay, these are serious brothers and sisters that Vicky Mac can talk. Vicky Mac catalog is one of the biggest independent catalogs outside of the majors. 800 songs. She owns that. After she sold Gospel Eccentric. So she's still in the game in the publishing. She's still in the game. Wow. And this is gone into the 21st century, bro. Look, bro. This is the figures. The figures are absolutely nuts.
So you have.
And then don't forget that Kirk Franklin is still selling up to 2021 and 2022. He's still doing gold and platinum certification as an artist.
Fantastic.
And Madisha is doing gold and platinum singles. There's several. I've got the figures, but we don't touch the 2000 yet. But we can tell you the after effect, right?
Yes. Yes.
And several of these people, in terms is a CC1, and they have their own label of music production and studios.
Which is good.
Yes. So a lot of them. That's how people like Kingship Records, which is based in Birmingham, yes, because they're doing digital release and they're smashing. So I mean, he told me he got a royalties for songs as far as South Africa, where some songs were performed, and he got royalties. Ching ching.
I like that.
Yeah, I like that too. You see, because that we're talking about, this is what we're talking about. Serious movements. And on top of that, let us look at our brother James Poiser, based in Philadelphia. Started developing his musical skills in Sheffield as a young man.
In Sheffield?
Yes. And his father was the legendary Poiser, one of the legendary black preachers from UT, bro. You hear me, bro? Yes.
Wow.
And he's a major producer. He's worked the Lauryn Hill's Miss Education album. He worked on that, which recently was certified 10 million copies. And he was on that in production and keyboards. That's just one project. The other projects he worked on is with Jill Scott on her first album, which did 2 million copy. I mean, several. And this is just one brother who's from the church, and he's worked with Adele and her second solo album, which did 10 million copies. So this brother is accustomed to doing big numbers as a session musician, as a songwriter, and as a arranger and a producer.
Fantastic.
And this is James Poiser. This is another one of my brothers from here who is migrated and lives in Philadelphia.
And worked with Adele as well. Such a fun.
Oh, yes. So he's worked with several hit-making. Nora Jones and her album. One of the singles was contemporary #1 from that album. And he was involved in that, in the songwriting and production, and played the music.
Wow. We have some fantastic talents, don't we?
Yes. The thing about it is that by the time the gospel music was so impacting that it helped the music market globally to go $40 billion in gross earnings. The music market peaked at $40 billion at the contribution of Eccentric Records, black-owned, La Face Record, black-owned, Perspective Record, black-owned, Uptown Record, black-owned, Bad Boy Production, black-owned.
Yes.
Do you get the picture, bruv,
yes.
of the 90s?
Yes.
And let's not forget about the Jack Swing, Mr. Teddy Riley. and Jerkins, all these production people. Look, there was one point, and I'm going to read it to you, just to give you an idea what Mariah Carey and Randy and Monica was doing during the 90s, bro. It's a total nutcase. And let us not forget, right, with New Color from New Color, the company or the music band that was co-founded by Lawrence Johnson, they were involved in the soundtrack to do with 4 weddings and a funeral, which grossed over $250 million, close to $250 million. And the track that they did was Smoke Gets Into Your Eyes. and they were on that particular soundtrack, You Colors, the Black group, which was released in 1994, and it became the first successful film soundtrack for Britain, and it grossed over nearly $250 million.
Wow. Wow.
With Nicky Brown and production, with Lawrence Johnson and his group doing the vocals and one of the tracks. That's to show you of the impact of New Colors in turn. And matter of fact, when New Colors released their last album, and it was released in the US, it sold 60,000 copies in the US. And at one time, they were actually the biggest selling gospel group out of the UK in terms of creative exports. Now, if they did continue, it's quite possibly they would have done platinum and gold in the US. If they continue, whatever the politics behind it, I don't know. But potentially.
Yes.
Let us not forget what Soul to Soul was doing.
Oh man.
They were don't stop. When I remember them hit, when they smash, boy, I mean, bam. So you had all these different productions going on from the UK, right? Yeah.
Yeah, and you touched on something there about the soundtracks from some of these things, because that's massive. Can be potentially so big, can't they?
Oh yes, of course. Because if you think about the percentage, coming back in terms of, depends on their point productions and what the arrangement and what. Yeah, it could. Yes. And that established Hugh Grant as a major actor internationally. All that.
Yeah. So, because it's like a dream come true, isn't it? When you go out there and you put your stuff out in terms of your writing and your music and your production, and then it's adapted to something like that, a film that's gross so big. It's a dream come true, isn't it?
Yeah, and when you think about the touch of jazz, which was a black-owned studio, which Jill Scott did. Who is Jill Scott? Which, of course, James Poiser was involved in that production in 2000. So he started it from 1990 with Erykah Badu, and with 3 million copies here. Voodoo by D'Angelo, gold and platinum in the UK. Platinum, just listen, bro. So you having all that, and you have this musician, songwriter, producer, multi-instrumentalist from Sheffield, Yorkshire. So this is one of our black brothers, born in the UK, migrated to the US and became a kingpin, a power broker, creative power broker.
Fantastic.
So yes, we can see that we have produced people who are just as commanding and quite capable. I mean, you have a Ken Burton, a black composer and classically string, who is responsible for many behind the scene things in the UK. We haven't touched him yet. Is another
right. So,
look.
So do you find that a lot of these people then are happy to actually develop their craft in UK as opposed to emigrating to the States?
Yeah, some of them go back and forth. They reside here. They reside here, but they come over and ask. Hollywood might ask them to do a soundtrack score, and they might do it at Abbey Road Studio. And Lord of the Rings. Lord of the Rings comprised of the best of the classical community.
Because I asked that question because I often hear, and we go in all the different musical genre. And it goes right across to the Caribbean, you've got Marley and all the reggae artists and loads of other artists who've actually done things in UK and become explosive, So as you say, there's no border with people traveling from one to the next. It's just a matter of making connection with whoever, I suppose, and what you do.
Yes, because remember, the music community is a small community. it knows everybody after a while. It knows, who is the master at string arrangements and compose? Oh, John over there. Yes.
Oh, yeah, right. I get you.
Like, for instance, if you think about Benjamin Wright Jr., a Christian brother who's worked with people in gospel and so on and things like that, as well as a secular, he was called by the Nobel Peace Prize to conduct the orchestra on 2 occasions,
Wow.
2 occasions.
Wow.
Had nothing to do where he is from as such.
No, it's just...
It had to do with what he was going to deliver to the table,
Yes.
Had nothing to do with whether he's your color or he's white as that wall, or nothing to do with that. Can the man deliver what we want? Absolutely.
And you touch on that. So I think I touched on in the last time we spoke, was the Larry Sifri story, when he actually went to South Africa. I think at the time Mandela came out, because he's a poet as well, is Larry. And he just wrote a song, and it was adapted by the South African, Mandela sort of situation, and became massive.
Yeah, these are what you call cultural movements and phenomenon that change history as we know it.
Yes.
I mean, when I look at Kurt Franklin, for instance, Kurt Franklin, according to the Record Industry Association of America, is the second best-selling gospel musician and composer and arranger of all time.
Really?
Next to Amy Grant.
What's his origin?
Kurt Franklin's origin, of course, is from the church, as far as we know. He was born in the church and so on. He was raised in the church. Midst of all the challenges, he's a church boy.
In the USA?
Yes, of course. No relations to Aretha Franklin at all.
Right, okay.
No, as far as we know.
The church has manufactured, you could say, I think that's probably, I don't know if that's a word, a lot of artists, whether or not they stay as gospel singers.
I mean, well, let's put it this way. As the late James Ntume said, there's 2 communities that some of the best musicians come out.
Yes.
And that is the church and the jazz community.
Okay.
When you're in the church, you are taught how to improvise and survive. When a church sister start a chorus, I'm sure you know what I'm talking about.
Yeah.
I am under the rock. Brother, you better, come on, let's get into the groove. She's not asking you ready to start yet? Hello? Yeah. So these brothers were put on the spot. So it was a sink or swim situation.
Yes.
So there was a lot of innovation and syncopation, and everybody, as they both play with each other, they understand the groove. They become a unit.
Yes. And that developed over years, isn't it? I mean, a lot of people are brought up in the church, and the singing and the, everything's from day one.
Day one. Look, I started to sing with the choir. Think about it. I started to sing with the adult choir at my dad's church before I was 10.
Yeah. Brilliant.
But that is normal, isn't it?
Yes.
Normal church, normal black church.
Yes.
What is the...
Yeah. Yes.
What?
I remember doing it myself.
Yes, exactly. So, and on top of that, Lloyd Ellis taught me and Deroy to understand appreciation the guitar in classical.
Oh, really?
Yeah, that is my formal training. I had formal training in classical guitar.
That's fantastic.
Yeah, so that's why I think that impacted my analysis. When I look at strings and everything, I can hear all kinds of.
Okay. Okay. That is super.
So I bill on that. So when I'm looking at a creative person, I'm analyzing from different level. What is he doing here? Why is this? Why is that?
Okay, that's very interesting. I did my bit on the guitar, as in
yes.
the bass
Can you tell me
guitar.
about yourself now, because you were part of the Gospel Flame, how that evolved? You see, what happened there?
That's a very interesting thing, because you know what?
Yeah.
I made contact with two of them.
Really?
Myself, let's say three recently. One is in St. Kitts, which is where it's from originally, and he's doing a lot.
Right. So it's a multicultural group.
Yeah, it's well, I mean, yeah. Two from
So one is
Kitts,
from that St. Kitts.
Two from St. Kitts, two from Jamaica. That's what it was.
Whoa! So this two islands meet. Oh,
yeah. So I have just made contact this week to do a some sort of contact again, because it's been a long time since we sort of, and I'm hoping that's going to happen. But the one in St. Kitts is actually got his own sounding company going on there, right? And the other one is here in Birmingham, and he's been in Birmingham all along, singing in some of these gospel groups that you're talking about. And one, I believe, is in Spain. So I'll make contact. And
well, this is quite great, because the thing about it, this is important for our generation, because I mentioned the Gospel Flame to some people, and they said, "What?" Because it's triggering memories.
Oh, absolutely.
Now, okay, with gospel. Okay, let's go back to the Gospel Flames now. What denomination was it? Was it connected to prophecy or?
No, we're a church of God. We've come from Answorth in New Testament Church of God in Dozels.
Well, hold on a minute. So you were under S.U. Thompson?
Yes.
You're joking.
That's where I grew up. From a very anyway. Yeah. That's where we formulated the Gospel Flames at age 15 and moved on. Anyway, that's another story. We can go into it. So fantastic. Yeah.
Okay. No, so, you do realize the Gospel Flames influence the new kids on the block, like Patrick White and so forth, because that's what they hear when they were growing up.
Well, I'm learning this.
Yeah, that's what I'm still trying to tell you. I'm trying to tell you, this is the after effect of what you did.
Fantastic. and as I interview people along the way, I'm hearing more and more about this, because we just did our thing. We traveled around. We went all over. We went to London, went to Manchester, went to
I remember. Listen, I remember as a youth before I went away. I remember seeing you live.
Really?
That's what's crazy. Remember, you used to be a convention.
Yes.
Brother, listen, you used to tear up the place. Come on, bro. Come on.
That's fantastic. So we we'll talk more about that, because I'm hoping to just connect with those guys.
Yeah,
again.
Because I think it's very important that we connect, because what happened there, they need to know what the impact they did, because there's one thing to actually play in that time capsule.
Yes.
But what does the time capsule do to the next generation of youngsters that's coming up?
Interesting point.
Yeah, because each time, as I said to you, each particular creative power broker is influenced by somebody else. Yes. He or she doesn't actually come a creative entity just by the stroke of a button or stroke of a pen or paint or whatever. There's an influence going on from somewhere else.
Right.
Bring him to the point, and then he's going to take he or she to the next.
Yeah. Absolutely excellent.
Yeah, excellent. This is how creativity works, because you had to be you are actually mentoring. You're actually mentoring. You're mentoring other artists directly or indirectly, and you're not aware of it.
Yes, yes. And it's very evident that was the case, because although we weren't thinking of it, I certainly wasn't. I've spoken to people recently, and what they've told me has been amazing. You know,
yeah,
going back to that point of us being there doing our thing, been amazing. This has been great. Again, this has been fantastic, you know, because we are now making some sort of legacy here, where we're bringing up so many different people doing what they do in the way they do it. And I gotta say a big thank you to you. I mean, your knowledge is just absolutely amazing. And to link with you with what you do and that, you know, is fantastic. So I gotta say a big thank you, sir, again, you know, and let's go forward and do the rest as you see it.
We're gonna, I suppose we're gonna have to peak at episode 3. Is it episode? I can't keep up.
But if we go, if we bet the last one, episode 4, because we got 3A and 3B. This is 3B, so we go to 4 next.
Yeah, as I said, I would have always pulled back to the 90s as I go into there, and then we peak, because if it is quite each decade of, because we're in the 3rd decade of the 21st century. There's been a lot of you know, Marvin Slabs and so forth, all these different people that is from commissions and Fred Hammond and so forth, all have in their respect been hit makers in their respective, yes.
Okay, well, listen, I'm open to be led by yourself as to when we peak in terms of, you know, finishing up, because you're the person, you're the man with the knowledge.
Okay, well, right. we can actually, there is a point where we can do the late 90s and 2000, because there's a lot of data right there, because we haven't talked about the major Black executives who were part of the movers and shakers, the bottom, and the production team. So yeah, we could do. That's fine.
Super. Okay, Kevin, thank you so much again. It's a pleasure as always. All right, and let's catch up and do some more of this. Yeah.
Anytime, brother. We
nice
do it
one.
because we need to deliver this message as quick and as efficient as possible for the next generation.
Absolutely.
Thanks again. The pleasure is mine, brother. Rich blessings.
And the same to you, sir. Thank you. Bye-bye.